The national spotlight has been on South Carolina in the past week. Now, lawmakers recently voted to remove the Confederate flag from their state capital, and other states are also looking closely at statues, plaques, and other images that memorialize Confederate leaders. For example, in neighboring Texas, there was a renewed effort to remove a statue of Confederate President Jefferson Davis from the University of Texas campus in Austin. And did you know there's a plaque here in Old Town that marks the site of a Confederate battle? Some local residents want that removed as well. Let's get into the line. Panelists, I'm joined at the table today by Tom Garrity from the Garrity Group PR. Dee Dee Feldman, former New Mexico State Senator, is here. Rob Nicoleski from Watchdog.org is back. And Antoinette Cedillo Lopez, she's Executive Director of Enlace Comunitario. Now, Rob, let me start with that plaque in Old Town. You know, we were talking a little bit around the table. A lot of us didn't even know there was a plaque there. A lot of viewers have, you know, before the stories on Channel 4 and Channel 7 a couple of weeks ago, they had no idea it was there. I have a question. I got to think that this is one of the most heavily foot trafficked areas in our city, if not our state, Old Town. Would you not come away thinking we were a Confederate leaning state if you saw a plaque in Old Town on the gazebo? Is that a reasonable assumption if you were visiting here?
Yeah, although, I mean, the Civil War in New Mexico has always been interesting because I think it's always been overlooked.
Yeah.
I live in Santa Fe, which is not far from Glorieta. And Glorieta had a rather significant battle. But you drive by there, you do not see, you would expect there would be some sort of national
I like the way you use the word
spot.
battle. The plaque in Albuquerque is over a skirmish.
Over a skirmish.
I don't know
yeah.
what a skirmish even is, honestly, when it comes to war, but
Yeah.
you know, it's just one of the, but the point being, is that offensive? Is that, you know, some African American leaders here want to have that removed? Is there the same issue for you as the Confederate flag?
No, I don't think they're
Okay.
quite the same. I spent half my childhood in Texas. I moved there when I was 11 and lived there all the way through college. And when you go to a lot of Texas towns, you'll see right in the square of a lot of towns, you'll see a Confederate memorial. I've always felt that as long as a memorial is there as a memorial to the dead,
Right.
and there is not any kind of normative statement saying, you know, this is commemorates, you know, the people who died in the War of Northern Aggression or something like that. I think as long as there's not a normative statement there and it's just a memorial, I really don't have a problem with it. And the Albuquerque thing kind of straddles the line, but it doesn't. To me, it's not the same thing as a Confederate flag, especially in South Carolina, where I don't want to dominate the conversation here, but in anyone who has studied the Confederate flag in South Carolina knows that it was erected and the flag was put up there in 1961. This, not 1861, 1961. It was a poke in the eye to the civil rights movement.
Right.
So that's why I've always felt that the Confederate flag should come down.
Senator, same poke in the eye theory for a plaque in Old Town?
Well, let me just first say that I represented the Old Town area for 16 years, and I never knew that plaque was there.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, that's right.
But it's not inflammatory.
Okay.
It is a
I got to challenge you there a little bit. To who?
Well, not as inflammatory as the flag. That's what I meant. Because the Confederate flag is so full of symbolism, and it is a poke in the eye at most blacks, I think. And this is a little more obscure than that, and commemorates the skirmish that went against the whole history of the Civil War in New Mexico, in which the Union won and the Confederates lost. And
would it be okay if there was a corresponding plaque for the northern side? Would that be a better
it would be
solution?
better. I think it would be better.
Okay. Let me ask Antoinette that very same question. Does that
I
make
like
sense?
that because in a way this is sort of like speech because it's not the symbol. It's not the symbol of hate. And the way to combat offensive speech is with more speech.
Gotcha.
And I think it's offensive personally. I wonder who owns the facility. How did it get there? That's really why are we commemorating that? That's just interesting to me. And I find it offensive that we're commemorating a skirmish that the Confederates won. Okay, who really cares about that? But the response is to put up another plaque and to commemorate those who died. You speak about Glorieta. A little known thing is all of the Hispanics that were involved, all of the Native people who were involved in New Mexico's role in the Civil War. And so that's what I would think. It's like bring out more information, bring out more facts, instead of just this weird little plaque that I honestly didn't even know was there.
Absolutely. You know, Tom, Sons of Confederate Veterans is the group that were still in the plaque in Old Town. Ostensibly that wanted this. I mean, no one would you know, stand in front of them and say you have a right to do that, certainly if you want to commemorate something. But I'm back on the issue of placement. It just seems odd to me that the gazebo is almost like a dead center bullseye of all of our sensibilities. In what I was getting at with Rob at the beginning of this is, it makes it seem like there's a community agreement when you have it in a public place like that this is something we all agree should be commemorated. It feels to me it's more like a license plate, a vanity plate that somehow slipped in there. It's an interesting thing.
I don't know if I'd go to the vanity plate, but I understand the argument. You know, it's you know, they got it up there. You know, and now what do we do? And I think that's the conversation we're having. You know, there have been different conversations and suggestions as far as putting up a plaque to commemorate the you know, the lives lost from the Union side, and then some have suggested, well, this is better placed and left in a museum. And you know, I was really struggling with this because, you know, a museum is definitely appropriate, but and no offense to museums and stuff, I know I'm going to hear it now, but people don't go to museums. And the conversation, as important as this is, it shouldn't just be limited to a museum. And so, you know, I think that because if we didn't have this tragedy in Charleston, we wouldn't be talking about this today. And that would be a tragedy because, you know, it's still very much alive.
On another local subject, that I like the way you brought up something a second ago, the Oñate statues that we have, the Oñate buildings, the Conquistador Oñate that we commemorate in a lot of places here in our state. No small controversy. Our colleague Heath Hausman had a piece in his publication a little bit ago, New Mexico NM Politics, advocating that it was the same, that commemorating Oñate is the same as commemorating
I thought the piece was very thought-provoking. I don't see them exactly the same because the Confederate flag has become a symbol of hatred, and it's become more than what it is. Oñate, and the part that is similar, I think, is that Oñate to Native people is very much the symbol of the conquest, and you know, victors end up telling the story. And that is what has happened here. But again, what you do is you bring out more information. I think it's really great that people are learning all of the facets of this man in history and what has happened since then.
Oñate, Rob, it's interesting, even reading the comments on Heath Hausman, very strident. People are really polarized on this.
That's what struck me about this, is that and this is the slippery slope we go down when we're concerned about who we're defending or who we're commemorating, is that when you take a look at the comment section from Heath's article, you see lots of Hispanic people saying they taking great offense to what he brought up, which makes me think this is sort of, you know, the politically correct cul-de-sac we end up in, where okay, yeah, if we're talking about taking out the Confederate flag and we're in New Mexico and we're basically inured to that, but if you're talking about goring my ox,
stand back.
Yes, and get out of the way.
Well, it was a very complex conquest.
It is, and the other thing that I think to bring up here is that I think there's a difference between commemoration and acknowledgement. For example, a few years ago I was in France, and I'm a big student of history, so I wanted to see where they had the guillotines.
Oh, sure.
You know,
sure.
And because there were so many famous
people
who were killed there.
That way.
I was walking around Paris.
Yeah.
I could not find any kind of statue or anything. All I could find was a plaque in a roundabout, down on the ground, acknowledging this is a site where people like Danton, Robespierre were killed. Because I think the French were very sensitive about that part of their history.
The Nuremberg courts, until recently, it was just a small little plaque in a working courtroom.
Interesting.
It's not a museum.
You know, the situation in New Mexico is so different than the situation in South Carolina. We have a multicultural state, and back to this point about an acknowledgement. You know, we have a city of Santa Fe that celebrates the re-entry of Don de Vargas every year.
That's right.
And La Conquistadora is promenaded out on the plaza. It's the same city where the legislature voted overwhelmingly to send Popeye, the leader of the Pueblo Revolt, to be the New Mexico's statue and symbol in Statuary Hall. So
In the US
there are a
Senate.
lot of things that exist side by side in New Mexico peacefully,
Yeah.
I think, that don't exist in other states.
Interesting. Some years ago, we're going to need to wrap this up, but some years ago, about 6, 7 years ago here on the show, we had a town hall meeting with the artists from Santa Fe who built the giant Oñate statue in El Paso, Native community leaders here, some young people. It was pretty rowdy in here in the studio. It was pretty wild. And we never got to the bottom of it, certainly.
That's
And the
what I
artists took a lot of
disagree.
grief over it.
Coexisting peacefully,
Well,
I think it's
Right.
a lot of fissures and a lot of,
Well.
because it's offensive. Yeah, I mean, celebrating the conquest to the people who were conquered.
Yeah.
It's
And it came out in the legislature quite often with simple things like a memorial to Kit Carson. Whoa.
Right.
The Navajos were not exactly enthusiastic about that one.
exactly.
It is complicated. Up next, we talk with a local LGBT leader about what the recent Supreme Court ruling on same-sex marriage means for New Mexico.